Hi everyone and welcome to the studio. Before we start anything, I would like to say a really big thank you for purchasing this tutorial. I hope you know that your support is so appreciated and I look forward to you joining me today and doing some really cool stuff in the studio. So let's take a look at the product that we're going to be using today. We're actually going to work with liquid watercolors. Now, just before I start, I am no expert on watercolors. I'm not trained in, any art form using watercolors. I need to point that out right at the very beginning. But I've done my own explorations and I have discovered that these liquid watercolors in particular work beautifully on raw polymer clay. So what are liquid watercolors? All right, so you can get your watercolors in the tube form. You can get them in a block or a cake form, but you can also get them in this beautiful liquid form. And if you look at this one, look at the color, it's transparent, it's just beautiful. Liquid watercolors are washable, they are vibrant. You can get them in a range from very inexpensive to very expensive, and there's a whole range of these products. I started with the Ecolines and I loved them so much. I decided to purchase some of the other liquid watercolors on the market and give them a try and see how they work with raw polymer clay. Now, some of the cheaper ones don't work as well as the expensive ones, but you can achieve a similar looking finish depending on what you want to do to the surface of your clay. I have to pull these ones in and show you because this is the metallic range. I purchased this set, the Sargent Art, from Amazon. I think I got these 6 great big bottles and I think they're about $25. So I think the Sargent Art, for those that don't want to spend a huge amount of money, are probably a good middle of the range product to use, and these work really well. The Ecolines are actually my favorite. They come in a wide range of colors. I think there's about 62 different colors in the Ecolines. I could be wrong, don't quote me on that. You also have a white and a gold, which are opaque. The rest are really quite transparent. Very, very beautiful. So all the colors can be watered down. They can be mixed with each other. You can create your own custom colors. There's just so many things that you can do with liquid watercolors. So in saying all of that, we are now going to play with liquid watercolors on our raw polymer clay. I'm going to show you how to create a range of veneers, and then we're going to create a beautiful art pendant as our project today. So again, thank you for joining me. Grab a cuppa, sit back, relax, and let's get creative. Before we start any painting today, I just want to let you know my clay has been conditioned. I'm using Kato clay, but I know this works as well with Primo. It's been conditioned, run through the pasta machine on a medium thin setting, and I'm working on a small ceramic tile. All right, now I have found that some of these paints actually work on the surface of raw clay better than others do. I'm going to show you on a little sample tile to start off with. Let me pick up some of this orange. Can you see that? This orange is not working very well at all. It's just not wanting to paint. Okay, wash my brush. Let's grab this orange. This is kind of like an orangey yellow. Now this one is actually working a bit better. Can you see how I could actually spread that around and use that just like that. But if you want to be certain that you're going to get a good coverage of paint with all of the paints that you're using, then I would highly recommend you first, I'm just going to pull that out of the way, you first shave some chalk pastel onto your clay, that's going to give your paint some tooth. It's going to give it something to stick to. Normally I would shave white chalk onto the surface, but so you can see how much I'm using, I'm going to shave yellow chalk onto the surface. So let's do this. So you don't need a huge amount. You can overdo it with chalk, but we want enough, excuse me, so that our paint is going to stick to the surface. All right, I'm quite happy with that. Let's grab our brush again and let's try this one again. That's better. So now I'm getting a nice coating on the surface. Some of it is still beading up a little bit, and that's fine. I'm going to show you what to do if that happens to you. And you can see the yellow chalk underneath. So it's something you could think about as well, what colour chalk you use underneath. So just by moving the paint around with my finger, I actually get a really nice coverage. So that's my base coat, and I've just done one colour. You can go crazy and do lots of different colours, that's fine. I'm just going to show you a really basic one to start off with, and look, it's up to you guys to experiment and see what else you can do. All right, this is quite wet. I have quite a wet surface, which you can see there, but I'm going to pull in a different colour here and see what happens. So I've pulled in this beautiful turquoisey colour, and I'm just going to stick with stripes. That's all I'm going to do for this first piece. I'm just going to do stripes. And can you see how that, I don't want to tip it up because see it runs, but you can see how that kind of bleeds beautifully into the clay, into the paint underneath. Let's do a couple more stripes down here. Beautiful. Okay, wash my brush out and let's pull in this pink and see what happens. And I might do stripes this way now. Let's pull in a bit more pink. Oop. Kind of all bleeds quite beautifully. Let's go a bit over this side. Okay, I'm going to let that dry off a bit before I add any more colour, but I can see already that my paint is starting to blend and move. And if you look at this and you go, oh my God, that's so beautiful, I want it to stay just like that. Okay, it's probably not going to happen because these just have a tendency to move around so much. Yeah, be prepared that it's going to change. All right, so I'm going to let that dry off a little bit and then I can add more colour. My paint is pretty much dry on the surface of this. I can see a couple of small wet patches there, but that's okay. I'm going to grab my brush again and I'm going to pull in some different colours now. So let's just have a little bit of a play around. Okay, I'm going to pull in this yellow and look what happens when I run the yellow over the surface. We get a beautiful, I'm just going to put a little bit more in here. Can you see that? It kind of overtakes the other colours, pulls the other colours out of the way. Oh, quite luscious. Let's add a little bit down here. Remembering, I'm just going to do stripes. That's all I'm doing. Pull that one in through here. Okay, now let's pull in some of this pink again and see what happens if I use some of this pink here and kind of blend it into the yellow. Excuse me. You can kind of just play around and do so much with this. I'm going to pull some of this colour in here now. And as it goes through the wet colours, it just blends quite beautifully. Let's do that. Kind of feel like I need something else in here, sort of. And let's put a bit of yellow in there as well. So this is getting to something that I'm really liking and I'm quite happy with. I've got some beautiful, beautiful blended colours in here that I really like the look of. And it does actually make a difference. I just want to show you something. It does make a difference. I can see the yellow chalk that I've used on the surface. Just bear with me. I'm going to bring this one in because this was a sample I did yesterday. And this is on white clay with white paint. And it's white clay with white chalk. And it's pretty much, I'm using the same colours, but I can see a little difference in the base colour. So, you know, perhaps it does make a difference what colour chalks you use. But I think it's all fun in the experimenting. All right, let's pull a little bit of this one in. See what happens if I put some of this in here. Let's do some really fine stripes in here. Let's see what happens. I should have this one over this side, sorry. That might work better. But I've got some really beautiful areas of interest here. And what if I went like this? Let me just get this. And this is just a baby wipe that's dried out. I'm just going to pull off a little bit of the darkness in here. Let's just dab some of those bits off, the heavier paint areas. I'm just going to dab some of the excess. Okay, quite like that. Let me pull in some purple now, see what happens with a bit of purple in here. And again, it's all just experimenting, just to play. Let's do some this way now. So you can see dry on dry, you don't get much of that bleeding, but it's quite a nice contrast to have some of the bleeding and then some lines that haven't bled as much. So I'm quite liking this. I do think I want to pull a little bit more of this yellow in. And let's try here. And see what happens with that. And let's go down this way again. I think I might just leave it like that to dry and see how I like the look of it. And it's going to change. So if I go, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. Yep, it's going to change. But that's okay. I'm going to come back when this is completely dry and we'll see how it looks. The next veneer we're going to do is the spiral. So I've already chalked up my clay and I'm using a round brush this time. So I'm going to start maybe with this. I always start with this color. This is so beautiful. This beautiful turquoise color. I've loaded my brush and I'm just going to paint a spiral on the surface of my clay. Wash off my brush and let's pick up my next colour. Let's go some purple. And I don't mind if the two blend together a little because I kind of like that look. I am going to just pull a bit more into here to fill that out a bit. All right, I'm now going to bring in a very fine brush. And let's get some pink in here. And let's just do some nice pink stripy bits. Okay, just add some little stripy bits around. Wash that one off. Now let's pull in some yellow. You can kind of just go crazy with these. Look what happens when I drip the yellow into the blue. It's really quite beautiful. So I'm just going to drip. That was an accident, but it's quite nice, isn't it? I'm just going to drip little bits in here. I've got quite a bit of heaviness in the middle there. Let me just get a dry brush and see if I can pull up some of this that's quite dark. I could have used my baby white, but I can't find it. It's not next to me. All right, so this is coming together beautifully already and we've only just started. Why don't we pull in now some beautiful gold and swirl that around into some of the darker colours here. Okay, a little bit in there, a little bit in here. All right, so I kind of quite like some of these white areas left. White, I think I like the look of those, but we could, if we wanted to, just pull in some very fine little stripes in here. And this is where these little fine brushes come in really handy. Okay, what else can we do here? Let me pull in maybe a little bit of this dark blue into the yellow here and see what happens. We'll add some little dots in this area. They're not going to stay dots, they're just going to kind of spread, which just adds to the beauty of it all. You never know what you're going to get. So by keeping it quite simple, you know, without doing too much in the way of fancy design, you can just create some beautiful patterns just by blending these colours together. Let me get a bit of pink and pull it into here and see what happens. I quite like that, but let's go a little bit of yellow and blend that in around. Don't forget to keep washing your brush. I'm actually double dipping here, which you shouldn't, but that's okay. These are my paints, so I'm not wrecking anyone else's paints. Pick up this pinky colour here and let that blend around. And I think I'm going to pick up a bit more of the gold. Okay, let's go some gold around here. I quite like the gold blended in with some of the other darker colours. It looks quite beautiful. Gold in there. And I think we need gold in here. When the gold dries, it's actually so beautiful. I'll show you once this piece is dried. I'm actually getting to the point where I'm thinking I just like this. And sometimes you can go too far with them. I need to also remember that I'm actually going to cut a circle out of this. I find that these spirals look beautiful just as a circle pendant. So I need to remember not to do, you know, if I'm going to cut it out, I won't do any fancy stuff around the edges too much because there's no point. I'm not going to see it. I will just pull this in a little bit further out here. Oops. And let's get, I actually think I didn't have much concentration of chalk down the bottom here as well, which is why it's probably not attaching as well as what it should do. But yeah, I think I'm not going to do too much more on this. I might pull in a little bit of yellow maybe in here. I do like the yellow. Look when you just drop it on. Oops. It's quite beautiful. So we'll just let that do its thing, and I think I'm going to be happy with that one. During my time of experimenting and just playing around with this product, I found some really cool things that it can do. So I want to show you one of them right now. Let me show you something I prepared earlier. So this is actually some white clay, white chalk, and then I've just coated some of the yellow Sergeant Art and some of the red on this sheet of clay, and I've let it dry. There is a tiny little wet spot just in the middle there, but I'm not going to worry about that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring in my fine brush, and I've actually got two blotters here. I've got a piece of paper towel with texture, and I've got simply a piece of cloth which has no texture. So let me show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick up some blue paint, and I'm just going to create a spiral on the clay here. And I'm going to work with my cloth that has no texture. So I'm simply going to place it over the top, and I'm going to blot the excess paint from my piece, and look at what happens. That is just the coolest thing ever. So the blue has actually lifted the color from the base of the clay, and we end up with this beautiful kind of effect on the clay, which is just quite stunning. Okay, so let me show you. I'm going to do blue again, but I'm going to show you what blotting with the texture looks like. So let me pick up some paint and create a spiral, and let's blot, and you kind of get a little bit of a pattern look, which is actually really quite effective. So what if we let's try a different color, and let's see what happens if we work with a different color. And I might use I might actually use a textured blotter this time. So I'm going to pull in some purple. I'm not sure that the purple is going to work as well as the blue. I know with the Ecolines, the color actually stays on the clay, like it stains the clay really well. The blue has stained beautifully, but let's try the purple and see what look we get. I think that's going to dry quite beautifully. Let's try the magenta and see what happens with the magenta. See, I love how this one is looking so pretty. Okay, this time I'll just blot with my smooth cloth without texture. Let's pick up some of this. Let's just do a drop. Actually, let's do 2 drops. Okay, and we'll see what happens. Best to find a clean piece of cloth and blot, and you get that kind of look. It's really effective, isn't it? So I'm going to show you one more thing to do, but I want these little bits to dry first. So we'll let them dry, and then I'll show you another really cool little thing you can do. All right, this piece is dry enough. I've got a tiny bit of purple that's not quite dry, but I'm a bit impatient and I want to move on. So just to do this little bit now, I've got an old toothbrush, and I'm going to use my cloth with no texture, and I'm just going to actually I'll leave that lid on like that because this has a very handy little pour spout, and I'm going to just put a couple of drops into my toothbrush. If you saw that, you can pop it into an ice cube tray, you can put it in a little container, however you need to pick it up, but I'm just doing it this way, and I'm going to spatter onto my clay just like that, and then let's blot the excess. You end up with really beautiful looking cloths at the end of this. Let's see what happens, the big reveal. Look, you get beautiful spatter marks. I can see if we block them up really well, you can see just some really gorgeous little effects there. So you can try with different colors. I love how the blue looks in the orange here, and can you see this little section? Just gorgeous. So just another thing to think about when working with these liquid watercolors. Now, while we're here, I've got mess all over me. I just want to bring this one in. This is a sample tile I created, and I want to show you this one. This is the Sargent Art, so this is the colors that we're working with at the moment, which were relatively inexpensive and work really quite beautifully. I simply coated my white clay with chalk, and then I did a base of the yellow, red and some purple, let it blend in together, and then I simply sprayed with water and let it dry. So it was as simple as that, and you end up with these gorgeous little kind of water droplet effects on here. Make sure it sits flat to dry, and just something else that you can play around with that creates a whole nother look. I just wanted to pull this one in again and show you that I just added some additional bits and pieces on top of the surface of this one. I just didn't want you to say, wow, I didn't know that she did that. So I just added some additional purple, a bit of gold in here, and some pink and some gold in here, and some little lines across here. Really quite simple, but I can see that I've got some really nice, beautiful areas that are going to work well with certain pieces. So this is the end of this one now. I'm going to show you another slight variation now, and this veneer is going to include some texture. Now, I'm actually going to use a very fine texture because I've found just in my little bit of experimenting that the fine textures work quite beautifully. So I've actually got a feather that I'm going to lay down. Remember, my clay has got chalk on it, so the chalk is acting as a resist. Normally my feather would attach quite beautifully, but the chalk is repelling it. So I'm actually just going to position it down, and then I'm going to roll over with my brayer to create that bit of impression. I'm being careful not to move my feather because I don't want any ghosting to happen here. In actual fact, we could probably pop this one on the top, which I think will work well. So let's just really create a good impression here. Make sure we've got it well embedded so that we're going to see that texture when we use our paint. Okay, let's just pull that up. And I know it's really difficult for you to see, but I can see we've got a nice impression with the feather there. So we're ready to start painting. So I've actually pulled in some beautiful greens in this one, and I'm going to pull the metallic gold in as well. So let's just start by doing some of this green on the surface. And as we brush over that impression, you can see where it's kind of starting to fall into the creases, which is quite beautiful. Let's get some of my favourite turquoise colour in here. We'll just do a little bit of a blend. I better wash that. I shouldn't be double dipping, but sometimes I do. Okay, now I've got that, I'm actually going to use my finger to smooth it onto the surface beautifully like this. That's a great colour, isn't it? All right, now let's just, might actually just drip a little tiny bit off the surface. I think we'll do that. It just creates that beautiful wash look, doesn't it? So now I'm going to get my fine brush and I'm going to pull in some yellow. Fairly well load your brush up with yellow, and let's pull it in here and bring it all the length of the feather. I'm going to get a bit more, load it up a bit more, and pull it the length. And you can see it's actually starting to spread through those little veins of the feather. And I think I'm actually just going to leave this one, let it dry like this, and then I might do some of the spattering on it for extra effect. My feather veneer has now dried beautifully. It's got such a beautiful surface. I actually did go in and do another little strip of the yellow just in this section here, and I held it to the sides so it actually feathered out quite beautifully. So I'm sorry you didn't see that bit, but it was basically just what I'd done before. So I kind of thought you guys will get it. All right, I'm going to do a spatter on this one, and I'm going to show you how it just changes the look of the piece completely. And I might do a spatter. I think I'll do this yellow. Yep, we'll do this yellow. I've got it here, so we'll just do it this way. I need my cloth, my flat cloth without texture. And I'm just going to splatter onto the surface. And let's blot the excess very gently. Oh gosh, so nice. What a difference that makes. It just finishes the piece off completely. I really think so. But I might actually just do something else to this. Let's just see if this looks any good. And if it doesn't, that's okay. I'm just going to pick up a little bit of white, and I'm just going to pull a little bit of white through the middle here. And I think it's finished. The next veneer we're going to create is actually going to take advantage of the fact that we need to put chalk on the surface of our clay. So most of the other ones I've done, I've coated with white chalk on the white clay. This time I'm just going to use a couple of different colours. So let's shave that one on. So this is my base. I just had raw white clay, and I'm just shaving this colour on first. And that will be fine. And then I'm going to get some dark brown, and I'm going to shave some chunks of dark brown onto the clay just like this. So because I've got because I've got chalk just sitting on the surface of my clay, I need to embed it before I start painting. So I'm pulling in some Multix baked paper. This is just like a baking paper. I'm laying that down on the surface very carefully because I don't want that chalk to move and blend. I want to try and keep it in the, the kind of the chunky bits. If I blend it in, I'm not going to get the effect that I want. So I'm just going to, and if you apply too much chalk at this point, it's just going to sit on the surface. Oops. It's just going to sit on the surface. So we really want to try and embed it as well as we can. Just give it a good, firm press over. And then we'll remove our Multix baked paper, and you'll notice that that's actually taken up a bit of the excess chalk. So hopefully I'm going to get not a lot of movement when I do my painting. All right, let's just do our base coat now. I'm working with Ecoline inks on this one. They are absolutely my favourite to work with. So let's just pull in a few, maybe some oranges onto the base. I might find some of my chalks may blend, and if they do, that's okay. I'm just not going to stress. I'm going to take advantage of it. Let's bring some brown in, And we'll just blend these two together slightly. I think we need a bit more orange down in this corner. Okay, and I'm going to run over this with my finger to get a smooth surface and just blend those colours. Look how beautiful that is, even without any additional painting on top. And I know that this is going to dry quite beautifully as well. So I will let this dry slightly because I don't want to paint on it right now. I want to do some detail. And if I do detail on really quite a saturated surface, I'm just going to lose it. It is going to move. So I will let this one dry slightly and come back to you, and we can do a little bit more detail painting on this one. So my paint has dried off slightly. I still have a few wet areas, and hopefully it's dry enough that I'm going to get some detail in this. I don't want it to all blend together. So I'm going to pick up my brush and I'm going to do a couple of spirals on this piece. And let's just do some lines out of this one. And I quite like this yellow, so I'm going to pull, you can see there's quite a build-up of paint there. I actually dripped that there. So let's get this and let's blot up some of the excess paint there. Let's get some yellow, pull some yellow into here. A little bit more yellow. And let's bring some yellow in here as well. Maybe we'll do some down this way. Okay, what about a little bit of dark blue now? We'll see how that bleeds into the yellow. And you know, I don't really think I'm going to do too much more to this. It's quite wet in this area, so I'm getting quite a bit of bleeding. Maybe some little bits out here, some fine bits. And maybe we'll just do a little bit of yellow across here. I actually quite like it when you cross over some of the other paint. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but when you cross over and you get that whole bleeding look, it's quite beautiful. And we'll just put a tiny bit of the blue. Oop, I didn't pick any up then. Tiny bit of the blue in there. And that might have been a bit too dark, so we'll just blot that off. I think I'm going to blot this dark area off here. So you can see there's really no right or wrong with this sort of, with these sort of paints. You just kind of play around until you're happy with the surface. I think I might just leave this one now. It's always tempting to play more, but I think I'm just going to leave this one and we'll see how it dries. I'm going to show you another slight variation on how you can use these paints. I have coated some lime green chalk onto the surface of my clay, and then I've just shaved some darker green on, and I simply ran over with my finger to blend slightly. So I'm now going to do a base coat. So I'm going to get my flat brush and I'm going to go a lime green base coat. So let's pick up some lime green, bring it on the surface, paint it on. And I'll probably pick up some of the darker green as well to have a little bit of a contrast, or a little bit of a darker surface, sorry, I should say. I wasn't concentrating too well then. All right, so let's just blend this all over the clay. And I'm going to get a bit of runoff on here as well. So we'll let some of that run off. Okay. All right, I think I'm happy with that, and I'm just going to let that dry, and we need this one to dry before we move on to the next step. So this veneer is dry enough now that I can do the next step. So I'm working with a fine paintbrush, and I'm going to dip my paintbrush into some water, and I'm actually going to, oops, just get that drop off. I'm actually going to paint onto my clay so the drip rolls down the clay. Then I'm going to pick up some of this colour and I'm going to let that colour drip down. And the colour actually only goes where the water has gone. So the water kind of creates a little bit of a channel for it. And now let's pull a little bit of white down there as well and see what happens. Can you see it's just dripping down where the water has gone. So let's just put a little bit more white in there. Oops, and see what happens. Okay, I had actually a little bit of water on my brush then, so it may not work too well. I'm just going to blot that tiny bit there. All right, let's pick up a bit of water. We don't need a huge amount. We're going to, what if we go like this time? What if we do a bit of one like this? I'm sure you can see what I'm doing. So I'm creating the channel where my paint is going to go, and I'm going to drip it and drip it right there. Let's just drip that a little bit more. Let's get some white and pop in there now, and pop in there. And again, I think you should actually have your brush nice and dry before you put the white on. So the white actually pushes the other colours to the edge and you just get that nice halo effect around the white. I think it's quite beautiful. This time, rather than create a channel with the water, let's create a channel with our paint. So we're just going to go down this way, add a little bit more. I think I like creating the channels with the water better, but I thought I would just show you this way as well. A little bit more there. And now I'll make sure my brush is well dried before I drip the white on. What about if we now try a tiny bit of this one dripped onto the white? And you can see I had a little bit of water on my brush as well, which wasn't a good thing. So let's put a little bit more white on this one now. This is quite cool, this section up here. This is more of a, a bit of an experimental play around one. But it's kind of cool that you can create the channels where the paint is going to go. I'm not sure if you could do, like a spiral or anything like that. Actually, I think I'll just go water first. So let's go a really fine one here. Straight down. Right there. It's quite fun actually, just watching it too. Just pull that down. And now let's put some some white in this one as well. I think they're quite beautiful. See how this one I've actually got a line of the colour in the middle so I put colour, I put water, colour, white, colour, white. It looks quite nice. Let's get this one a little bit more and start from there. So I have a space of green in the middle. Okay, I could possibly, let's do another fine one down here. Actually, let's just see if we can stop it. I won't put as much paint on this time. Let's see if we can just stop it in the middle and maybe catch the excess. Let's have our paper towel ready to blot up the excess there. And let's get some white. And you know, if this is boring for you, just fast forward. I thought I'll have the camera going so you can see everything I do, so you know how I've got to that point. I wonder if it's going to stop at the end there or if it's going to keep going. I'm just going to blot it carefully. It's quite cool, isn't it? Creates quite a beautiful effect. I probably wouldn't use this section at the bottom, but I love how it works. You know, and you could play around with different, I don't know if you could do spirals. I've actually not tried spirals doing this way. I'm going to do another one which has got a little bit of a gap at the bottom. Actually, let's work from the middle here down to here. So I'm going to start my colour right there. That's really cool how it does that, isn't it? I love it. Kind of looking a bit like tiger stripes. Let's start our white from in here as well, and it just follows the wetness. It follows the way, you know, where the clay is wet, that's where the paint goes. That looks really cool. So I could actually pull in some simple little stripes in here as well if I want to. Add a little bit of interest. I can do some dots if I want to. So you can play around as much as you like with these veneers. And I think that's the beauty of creating these on polymer clay. There's, you know, there's no right or wrong. It's just like creating a little art veneer. I love them. And the fun thing is they dry beautifully and they manipulate beautifully. So you can create this beautiful piece here and then wrap it around and create a bead. So I'm really happy with this one. Just going to blot these bits off at the bottom, and I'm not going to lay this down on the workspace like flat to dry because I'm just going to keep it up about that angle and we'll dry it this way. So that's another way that you can use these liquid watercolours. The last demonstration I do today, well, this is just creating our veneers, is actually on black clay. So I have got some black clay run through the pasta machine on a medium thin setting, and I have just shaved some black chalk onto the surface. My hands are disgusting at this point in time, but let's not stress. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually flood the surface with a colour. So let's choose this beautiful vibrant pink colour, and it's wanting to bead up quite a bit on here. That's okay, we'll see if we can persevere. Actually, we might pull some purple in as well. So let's get, and I know you can't see it, it's really, really difficult to see, but we'll just, trust me, it's going to look amazing in the end. Okay, let's get some purple here as well. That's working a bit better, so we'll just do a mix of the purple and pink on the clay together. Okay, and just by flooding it, I'm getting a nice coating on the surface. And I am actually going to just spread it around with my finger, which seems to make a little bit of a difference as well. If it pulls away from the edges, I'm not going to worry too much. I'm just going to not use that bit of clay. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to pull in a round brush. Just get all the paint out. I'm going to pull in a little round brush and I'm going to pick up some gold paint. And I'm going to work a spiral into the clay. It has spread a lot. Let's just do a couple of lines up the top here. See how much spreading I'm getting? That's because my surface is very heavily coated with the paint, the liquid watercolor. Now I'm going to get a fine brush. Make sure there's no water on the brush, and I'm going to pick up some white. This is where you're going to be able to see my colour. So you can see that the white is spreading into the colour, and you can see it quite beautifully. I'm going to pick up a little bit more of this, the gold, and spread it around. Some gold in here. Let's pull that around. Look at that. It's just so beautiful. There was a little bubble there, so we'll pop that one. And gosh, I think I might just let that dry as it is. What if we try maybe three little dots, just like that. Now this is going to move. It's not going to stay like this. It's going to move. So I'm not going to get too attached to it at this point in time because I may not like it when it's dried completely. But at the moment, I'm really loving it. I do think, let's just pick up a little bit of that colour and pop in the middle and see what happens. It might spread out nicely, it might not, but we'll just leave it there. So I think we'll just let this dry. I always tend to want to play with things a little more. Just what if I did this and what if I did that? So I just might do it. But again, I can't get attached because, as I said to you, oh, look how that's kind of creating a fractal in the middle there. Quite beautiful. But let's pick up a bit more gold. See what I mean? I'm hopeless. Just keep adding to it and adding to it. Let's get a little bit more white in here. Just create some little highlight areas. And these fine brushes, if you can get your hands on one of these fine brushes, they can make all the difference. Okay, let me bring this one up. This one is going to have to sit and dry flat. And I really love that. I hope it doesn't move too much. All right, I will come back to you when this one is dry and we'll see if I like it then. First thing I need to do to make my pendant is to have some black clay, position it on a piece of paper, and then I'm going to cut a straight edge on my veneer, and we're going to butt the two up together. So remember, my veneer was number 5, so my black clay is number 5. I'm then going to get some Multix baked paper, and I'm going to position it on top, and I'm going to burnish along the line. So these two pieces of clay will join together. And notice I'm not doing it this way, I'm doing it along the length of the clay, or where the line is, so that I don't get any distortion in that line at all. Okay, so let's move this carefully off the piece, and I'm going to just grab my firm tissue blade and slide underneath the whole piece to release. Let's just trim those edges off. Now I'm going to get my scrap clay. This has been removed from here. Let's bring in my scrap clay. This is just run through the pasta machine. Sorry, I need my burnisher here. Through the pasta machine on a number 3 setting. And I'm just going to make sure it has a nice flat surface. You know how sometimes you can get those ripples from your pasta machine? Okay, we don't want that. So this one will now go onto my clay. Gently, gently, make sure your brayer is nice and clean. And if you're unsure, use some Multix baked paper on the top. I'm actually not going to run over it any more than that. I'm really quite happy with how this is. So let me just, I can see that my line is slightly distorted and I don't want a distorted line. So I'm going to manipulate my clay so that that line looks much straighter. All right, so now it's time to cut our veneer, and I'm going to cut, so I've got a little bit of black clay at the top, and make sure your blade is nice and neat before you start. Now I'm just going to cut off the excess from here just to make it a little bit easier. You don't have to do this. I'm just going to do that, and I'm going to get my craft knife and I'm going to come in, and I can still see that I've got my clay just needs to stretch a little bit that way. Okay. So I now need to just, sorry, I'm looking right over the top now. I just need to straighten that line up with that line. All right, so I'm going to cut quite free form now, and let's have a look. We'll just start from here, just go down. I really do hate cutting these veneers. They're so beautiful, but we'll just see what happens. With this shape, might not like this shape, might do something else. And look, you can use whatever you've got. If you've got beautiful shape cutters on hand, you'll use your shape cutters. I actually think I don't mind that. I'm just going to straighten it up a little bit there. Just take that bit off, and let's just take that bit off. And I can see that I had a little bit of a funny bit in the bottom there, so we'll just, I think I'm relatively happy with that. I'm feeling that this needs to come down a little bit more, so we'll just, oops, it would help if I had the right side of the blade. Let's pull that down a little bit more. And I think I'm happy with that. I might play around with the shape a little bit more, but this is the rough idea. So I would then just pop this onto a ceramic tile, pop it in the oven to cure, and that will cure for the recommended temperature for the clay that you're working with. It's also optional if you want to put thread holes in. I might actually just do that right now. Sorry, I'm just going to get a straw, and I'm going to use a straw to create my thread holes, and I'm just going to create one this side and one the other side. You will do your thread holes however you need to do them. I think we'll do it that way, and they're already done. Okay, I'll get this cured. The next step in the project is actually a really crucial one. So I've taken this out of the oven and it's still warm, and you can see that there's been no color change, at all with these liquid watercolors in the oven. In actual fact, with all of the veneers I've done, I've not found any color change whatsoever. So that's a good thing. But remembering that these are liquid watercolors and they're re-wettable. So when I first started using these, I tried a few different varnishes, and any varnish that was water-based didn't work because it simply just wiped the pattern off. So therefore, I would highly recommend you either use Kato liquid clay or any of the liquid clays, or some type of resin. So that would be my recommendation. So I'm simply going to show you how to use liquid clay. I'm going to put a small amount of liquid clay onto the surface, and I'm doing it at this point because I don't want anything to happen to this, the surface of this clay. So I've still got a few more steps in the creation of the of this component, this pendant, and I don't want anything to happen to it now that it's looking so beautiful. So I'm simply brushing onto the surface a thin layer. You can go too thick with liquid clay, and I'm going to brush over the black as well. Just go over the holes there and brush over this, and I will show you how to get that out of the hole in a moment. So a thin layer of liquid clay. That's all you need. I would actually, I would rather do 3 or 4 thin layers of liquid clay than try and cure one really thick layer of liquid clay. Now move your liquid clay well out of the way because I'm going to be using a heat gun to cure, and I'm just going to run a skewer through there to get the excess that was in the hole. Okay, my heat gun is going to be turned on to low to start off with. I'm going to move it around on the surface of the piece, and I've just created a kind of crude lazy Susan with a baking dish and a tile on my work surface. Look, if you want more information about curing Kato liquid clay with a heat gun and what else you can do with Kato liquid clay, I do have a tutorial available and it's on the website. All right, let's get this done. Now I'm curing to a point where it's gone crystal clear. So you can actually see if you watch it, and it's very easy to see on the black section here. If you watch it, it turns from a liquid to a solid, and it will go quite milky. And then if you hit your heat gun on it, perhaps on high for a little bit, it will go crystal clear. So that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, now I'm not sure if you can see that where you are, but my surface is beautiful and shiny, and it's just been taken to the right point. So this one is going to have another coat of liquid clay prior to doing the backing. Now you're probably wondering what I've got here, but I just wanted to show you this because I thought it was just a little tip that you might not know. My pendant started to curl up slightly around the edges, and so while it was warm, I popped a piece of Multix baked paper on top and a ceramic tile on top of that, and just let it cool down. It's still a little bit warm, but that's okay. But I just let it cool down like that, and your piece will flatten beautifully. So the other thing you can do is actually run it under cold water and shape it while it's cooling. So that's a whole nother tutorial. All right, let's get to creating our backing for this. Now I've got some black clay which has been run through a very thin setting of the pasta machine, I think number 5, and I ran it through then with a sponge to texture. And I'm going to simply lay this down on my work surface, and I'm going to bring in some poly paste, and poly paste is going to go over my the back of my component. Again, don't worry if you get it in those little holes. We're going to fix that up. Now you don't need a really heavy coat of this. The other thing I would suggest you be very wary of is getting poly paste on your liquid clay. I've actually done it before, and it just, if you don't wipe it all off prior to curing, it can leave some horrible marks on your liquid clay, and that's the last thing we want after you've spent so much time creating a beautiful glossy pendant. So I'm just going to hold the edges carefully, and I'm just going to pick up, my poly paste is nearly finished, but I have enough here. I'm just going to pick up a little bit. Again, you've got to go really carefully around these edges. Just a little bit on the edges. As I said, you don't need a lot because it's going to ooze out. You just want to touch. And those 2 bits where my fingers are will get sorted out fairly soon. Okay, position that down, and now I'm actually going to move this onto a ceramic tile. I need to make sure there's no air bubbles in the back. So I see there's a nice big air bubble there. Let's just get that out of the way. That looks, oh no, there's another one right there. So just push them to the side. Make sure your backing's really nice. Okay, let's position this down here. So I'm going to cut a border. Let me show you. Oh, see, I've got some poly paste right there and right there. I'm going to wipe that off before I start doing the rest. Now I'm going to create a border, and this is going to wrap up and around the edges of my pendant. So I'm just cutting away the excess, if you can see there. I'll show you once I've finished. So I've just got the border around the edge here. Now I need to neaten these corners so that they're going to fold up nicely. Let's just cut that a bit smaller, and then I'm going to just take a chunk out of here, and I'm going to take a chunk out of this one. Okay, let's lift that up from the work surface. Now I do need to spread a little bit of poly paste at the top here where my finger was holding on. Let's do this carefully. Peel that back, and then a tiny bit on there. Spread it over, and then we'll go down this side as well. Right, so now it's a matter of folding it up. I can see I've got quite a bit of excess here, so I'm going to trim that a little bit more, because the more I've got to cut away, the less I've got to cut away, the easier it's going to be. Okay, so I'm going to fold this over, just like this. And these 2 corners get joined together, and I will smooth those over. And then this is just going to fold up and around. I'm gently, gently teasing it around the edges, pressing it in. See, there's quite a bit of excess in some areas. That will be a little bit tricky to get off, but we can neaten it up. All right, so I've got my smoothing tool and I can just gently, gently tease these two together and do the same on the other side. Just tucks in neatly. All right, so I'm ready to trim. So I'm going to keep my blade parallel to my work surface and I'm going to start trimming. Work around until we get back to the beginning. So now it's a matter of neatening the whole piece. And what about those thread holes? Okay, I'm going to show you what happens with those in just a minute. So now you can spend some time neatening everything up, making sure your liquid clay, see, I can see I've actually got bits of poly paste on here, so I'm going to use a cloth and clean it up so it's really lovely. So this is where you need to spend time on finishing. If your components aren't finished properly, then you've pretty much wasted your time trying to make something nice. You know, you really do need to spend the time, in my opinion, on the finishing of your piece. Okay, so let's get this one. And I'm just going to feel around where that hole is. And I'm just going to create a hole this way. And you can see that. Let's grab my skewer. I'm just going to poke that out the other side. So I can just pull it off and then I can neaten that up. So I'm going to use the end of this one on this side. Make sure you don't get poly paste over this section either, because the poly paste actually dries milky. It doesn't dry clear like, oh, I can't find the hole now. Oh, there it is. It doesn't dry clear like liquid clay does. I'm going to go from this side. I've wrecked the back of it now, but I'll fix it. It's okay. There it is. There's my hole right there. Okay, so now I have to pull that clay back over where it was. And I'll need to re-texture. That's okay. We can play around with that. All right, so that is looking nice. I'm going to neaten it up and then I'm going to cure it again for the recommended temperature. My pendant is now fully cured and it's cool, and I'm really happy with how this one has turned out. So by creating the larger pendant, I've actually taken advantage of, utilizing all the veneer. We go to so much trouble to create these beautiful veneers. It seems such a shame to cut them up. So this is kind of one way that you can do it. Create large statement type pendants. So you can see the liquid clay creates a beautiful glossy surface. This one only had 2 coats of liquid clay. I was really happy with the surface after that. So you'll continue on until you're happy with the finished look of the surface of yours. I've got one here I coated with resin. You can see how beautiful and shiny that one is. The resin works incredibly well on these pieces, and it's just really quite beautiful. So I'm just going to bring in all our veneers. Let me just pull these all into view. So I've actually been creating madly over the last 3 days and trying all sorts of things. And, I hope that the tutorial has given you a little bit of an insight into using liquid watercolors on raw polymer clay. The finish is just really quite beautiful. You end up with a gorgeous veneer that you can mix and match with many of your other veneers. So that's it for the studio for now. As I said, I really hope you've enjoyed the class, and I must say a huge thank you for joining me today. So thanks, until we meet again, bye for now.